Hello, and welcome to the Makers Movement podcast, where we spend time with designers, collectors, curators, and of course, makers. If you're new here, this isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. Every month, we challenge ourselves to choose one handmade item that brings more intention, story, and fun into our lives. This month's theme is something to write with or to write on. This could be a killer notebook, a ceramic pen cup that actually makes you want to organize your desk, whatever gets your creative wheels turning. Today, I'm talking with Christina Covington, who makes ceramics in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. Christina does this really cool thing where she mixes collage, drawing, and painting right onto her ceramic pieces, so you end up with bowls and mugs that have these wild, colorful patterns inspired by whatever's happening around her. Her stuff is playful, but totally functional, which honestly is my favorite combo. We'll dive into how she develops these patterns, what it's like working intuitively, and why handmade pieces just hit different when you're trying to make your space feel like home. I had an absolute blast talking with her, so let's jump right in. Okay, so first up, I would love to understand more about how you got started, maybe your first interaction with clay and then actually creating something. What did that look like?
So my background is art education. So when I was in college, I was taking a lot of art courses, but you also have to balance that with the education side and the art education side. So I didn't even have room for a minor. It was just all packaged in there, a lot of studio courses. But the cool thing is you got a very broad education in the arts. So I got to kind of try all these different, one class of painting, one class of sculpture. And I took that class of ceramics when I was a senior. And I said, oh my God, if I had taken this year one, I would have changed my major. I loved it so much. But once I graduated, it was left on the back burner. I didn't go back to it for many years because it takes a lot of equipment and resources to do ceramics. It was something that came back into my life in 2018, and I went to a lot of workshops at Penland School of Craft in North Carolina.
Amazing. I'm really glad that you mentioned that it was almost like an instant love, because I feel like ceramics is one of those arenas where it's either I'm obsessed, I've got to figure this out, or never again.
Yeah, it's
So
definitely it just seems like that endless possibilities with ceramics. You can do sculptural things, you can do functional things, you can include it with other art forms, you can do printmaking on top of your ceramic surface and, just so many different avenues with it. Plus, as a kid, you think back to those times when you were playing in mud puddles and it's just from the earth, and that's just something I also connect with.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that's my next question. So I adore your work. One, because it's just
Thank you.
beautiful, but second of all, how much you pull in nature and the natural world. So I'm really curious, what is your process for finding inspiration or creating the initial designs for what you want to work on?
I feel like everything inspires me, so that's why it's hard for me to kind of repeat things again and again. Just taking a walk outside or going gardening in my backyard or going on vacation to another environment. I'm always coming back with more and more ideas. So it may actually be harder for me to edit myself than to try to look and seek inspiration. I don't feel like I'm even seeking it. I think it's just "Oh, this would be so fun," or "I love this idea, let me try it." And then as I'm working, the more you work, I think the more you show up in the studio, the more inspiration kinda comes to you.
Oh, that's such a good point. I think too, what's interesting for me is just at looking at your curation of what you've made. It's so stylistically consistent. Is that intentional, or is it something where as you're making it just kind of comes out and is it's
Um,
you, it's how you.
that is so funny that you mentioned that because I look comparison is the thief of joy, but also we're like human beings, we're gonna do that. I love that you think that because when I look at my work, I just feel like it's so diverse and different. To me, it doesn't look as cohesive as when I look at other people's. Sometimes I look at other people's handmade items and they have such consistency in repeating their designs again and again that I'm just like, wow, this looks like it should be in a shop. It looks very well made and intentional. So to hear that you think mine looks that way makes me feel really great.
I don't know, it's the truth. It's one of those things where even, when I was flipping through, different accounts of folks I was talking to about the art, I immediately was able to recognize yours, and I don't wanna make a comparison because I hate when artists do that, but it's one of those things where it's almost like how you can always tell when it's Matisse,
Uh-huh.
because it's never the same thing, necessarily the same forms, except for maybe there at the end, but it's one of those where you can tell by the way the lines are drawn, and there's almost this feeling of movement to it that you can just pick up on and be like, "Ah, I know who that is.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
movement is one of the things I do try for. I love to, when you're working on a 3D form, I love to think about how my design is going to go around the whole, like how am I going to lead the eye around the whole piece? But I think maybe my consistency in the look comes from my process of how I make, because it's always like the designs may be very diverse, but the way I create those designs is the same process or a similar process with everything.
walk us through that a little bit. Like, what does it look like to go like start to finish? And it's okay if it's different every time, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah. So once I create whatever type of vessel or form I'm making, like let's say I'm like throwing mugs, and I do work in batches. So I'll have like a set of maybe 12 that I'm making at one time. So and I actually don't even kind of weigh out my clay, because I like that they're gonna be a little bit different each one, because I feel like, especially since the pottery wheel does add so much consistency in the look of it, if I can add a little bit in of like this, because I'm not weighing them, I'm not using tools to measure everything perfectly. I do like that. So once I create the form, I actually, for the design, I cut from paper. I use recycled newsprint paper, and I'll cut all the different shapes that I'm looking for, and I will compose the image with paper first. And when you're working with clay, when it's wet, the paper will stick. Like you just wet the paper a little bit, sticks to the surface of the clay. So I use the paper kind of like a resist, and to set my design without really making marks into the clay first, so I can kind of change my mind and rearrange things as I go. And then I will paint over everything with like a background color or maybe even wax, so that it kind of sets the design in place. And then I'll peel all the images up, or all the paper up, and I'm left with that image, the shape that I want in that spot. And so that allows me to then go in, and I use the same tools for certain marks, that so I think that makes more consistency. So I'll just draw into it, and then I put underglazes as kind of like a painting. So it kind of comes out like watercolor for
That
the
is so
design.
clever. Yep. I was just looking at I think it was 2 vases you did. This might have been a couple weeks ago. I was trying to figure out how you did it because it was like the pale pink type glaze over top, and then it was the relief of the image, and I just stared at it for a couple minutes, like, "How on earth did you do that? This looks so freaking cool."
And I think it's like, to me, all the different techniques are very fun. So I know I have a very like laborious, long process for coming up with my images, but I love the process. I feel like I'm getting to collage, I'm getting to draw, I'm getting to paint, I'm getting to do all the things on these surfaces. And so that's another, like when I was learning as much as I could about ceramics, going to lots of different courses, I learned like everyone finds the way that they love to create what they can connect with the material, and that's what comes out in their work. So you can learn something and be like, "Oh, I really hated that process. I'm letting it go and gonna go towards this other process."
That's huge. So speaking of, is this something where do you come from, like, a family of makers? Is this something that's always kind of been in your life before school, or how did you kind of get introduced to this world?
So I feel like I came from a family of kind of like DIYers. And also, my mom was very into art when I was younger. She would actually go, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, I don't see it as much anymore, but she would paint windows for Christmas time. So you would see seasonal holiday designs on businesses downtown around where we lived. And my mom, I think she started doing it when she was in high school. And so when I was little, I would go with her, and I would go and do that, and then I would help her. So,
Oh, it's amazing.
yeah, so connection to that there. And also my dad was a builder, a carpenter, so I grew up seeing him make a lot of things.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I'm always curious because I feel like the opportunities that are there for handmade and makers, like, I feel like sometimes it's a little bit easier for people to make the jump to that path, like, if they've had an example of it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
that's
that makes
super
sense.
interesting. Okay, so tell me about a project that surprised you, that did not go the way either that you wanted it to or it took a, like, life of its own direction. Anything that comes to mind?
One workshop that I did take at Penland was very just super open. You kind of could make whatever you enjoyed, and the instructors were there to support you. And one of the instructors happened to just make a lot of animal sculptures. So I felt like I was surprised pleasantly and that I was able to create something like kind of massive, in my opinion, so much larger than anything I ever created before. With ceramics, you get a lot of technical problems, things collapsing, things cracking, things drying unevenly, and it may not make it through the whole process. So you kind of learn that nothing's precious and it's all like a learning experience and it keeps you humble and all that. But I was very like it helped my confidence so much to just be brave enough to try something that I had never done before. Because to me, that's what the learning experience is all about. You're there to push yourself and not just do the same old thing that you would normally do at home. So that was unexpected. And I had no preconceived notions that that was something that I was going to make or an avenue I would take. And then I was able to do it. So that was amazing.
Huge. That was incredible. I feel like that's a good segue into my next question, which is more around like, what is something that you wish you could tell folks that, or like something about ceramics or just handmade goods in general that you wish more folks knew?
I wish people didn't think of it as a luxury. I wish people knew the value of like pushing yourself to try something, take that risk. Because I do really believe that everyone should find some sort of craft or something that they can do with their hands, their mind, and their heart that brings them joy and satisfaction. Even if it's gardening or, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a craft, but just something you're doing with your hands because I do think that it's brought me so much joy and helped me to grow as a person that I just think that that's something that's kind of missing in our very frantic modern lives is that we kind of forget how satisfying and how, having this product or something that you complete with your hands is like just so satisfying.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I think too that's a big motivation for me in starting this project is, at work we're constantly talking about AI. Everything's generated. And it's one of
Yeah.
those things where like we're kind of removing some of the importance of like the human aspect and the storytelling aspect. So that is I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's such a motivator for me of like it just feels better. It's just
Mhm.
cooler. Like
Yeah.
I can't put words to it, but it's just one of those things where, like, it adds so much, like, richness to, everyday things,
Yeah.
and I'll show this, but this is, like, my favorite mug that I've had forever, it's from a local artist. It's like, knowing that I met this person, that they've made it with their hands, that I get to use it every day, like, it's just a whole different experience.
It's definitely something that helps you to slow down and be mindful and appreciate and connect in a way that you don't necessarily do with something that's mass produced or you have one precious mug that you love to use that is your go-to.
Yep, that's it. On the theme of functional art, do you have any stories around, like, friends or family or even customers of yours that still have stories about the things that you've made for them? Or have you seen your handmade goods in somebody's house, like a relative or anything like that? Like, do you have experiences of like, "Oh, that's mine, I made that."
One of the things that sticks out in my mind right now is people being repeat customers and coming back and kind of telling me stories about the my work that's in their home. One person that had bought a couple mugs from me, she said she loves having guests over and she lets them pick. She said they always pick my mug, which I'm like, I don't know how many she has in her collection, but that makes me feel so good. She had to buy more because she also said it makes her mad because they take her favorite mug when they're taking mine. So I just think that that's super special. It gives me the confidence and motivation to keep going and move forward, making more work and being a maker when I hear things like that and how that's impacting other people and then spreading to even more people, when she shares that with her guests and her loved ones that come to her home.
Oh, that's incredible. That was so cool here, and I get that. That's one of those where, like, when you have guests, you're like, "Please don't choose that one. Please don't choose that." It's fine. Like, um, creating is one thing, being a maker is one thing, but then creating a business out of that or trying to make it a full-time thing, that's a whole different beast. So how do you kind of think about your work versus the level of like, is this your main income driver? Is it something that you create first, sell after? Like, how do you kind of think about where this stands in terms of just incoming?
Well, for me, just financially, I feel like I'm kind of privileged in the way that We actually built our own house, and it's a tiny house, and like I mentioned, my dad was a contractor, so he helped. So, by making that choice early on, because I knew I wanted that for myself, but I didn't feel comfortable taking a financial risk because I didn't wanna be stressed out financially. So,
Yeah.
by having that ability to just kind of put yourself out there, because that's a whole 'nother thing is, like, just for me, the biggest obstacle is just mentally the vulnerability of putting your work out and having to cringe, like, promote yourself kinda thing, like, that to me is the hardest thing, but financially, I
Yes.
do want it to be my main income. Fortunately, because of my teaching background, there is such a big need for substitutes. So the past, maybe I'd say 3 years since I've been doing this, I've actually done, like, a long-term sub position as an art teacher at some schools in my county. So that's helped me relieve the pressure of learning the in and outs of business because I just feel like I don't have patience in my life, and I can feel that failure kind of if you don't hit certain financial milestones. So, by doing the subbing position, I'm able to relieve some of that pressure because I am seeing growth as a maker with my little small business, but right now it wouldn't be enough to really support 100%.
Yeah, and it's incredible too that, like, the teaching aspect is still in line with the creativity. Okay, so I wanna talk about makers markets and craft fairs for a second because I know that's generally how I've interacted with handmade goods in the past. So how much of that is, like, a priority for you when you're thinking about, like, what you're making, how often you go to makers marts? Just kinda talk me through your mentality around those.
This past year, I tried to do larger ones. I think we mentioned the Porter Flea, that was one that locally for me in Greenville, South Carolina, we have the Indie Craft Parade, so I was kinda looking for markets that were along those lines, because I felt like I love the work that's in that market, and I love seeing and being a shopper for those markets, so I was kinda looking for more of those opportunities. I This was kinda like my year to try as many things as I could, even if they were out of state. This was the first time I ever did a market out of state that wasn't super hyper local to where I am. I think that that's been really great for expanding not only my business and my reach for other people, but also my connection with other makers and other opportunities as well.
So, in terms of, like, scheduling, is that something where you're kind of reacting more to the stuff that you see is coming up? In other words, it's like, are you making a big
Oh, with what
list
I
of
make.
things for a market?
I do, and I have other friends that kind of are asking me like, "Oh, keep tallies of how do you know what sells and what people want?" I think I know, but then you go to a different market with a complete different set of people, and it's always different. You might have one market where you sell out on bowls. So you make a ton of bowls thinking, "Yes, people love this bowl." And then the next market you go to, you don't sell a single bowl, and if you had had more plates or something, you could have sold those. So the more it almost would drive me crazy to try to figure it out because there's just so many factors and seasons matter, buying gifts for other people, which I think is a big thing with handmade. Like, it's almost like gives them permission to buy something that might be a little bit more expensive than they would buy it for themselves. Buying it for a loved one is what it seems like a lot of people who connect with my work and talk to me about. I will say I met one other potter that she keeps tags on her inventory and has data on every item that sells in every market so she can put that input into her making process. And for me, that would take some of the joy away. Like, that's just not how I operate. And again, I don't even know how you would make I don't see just, like, offhand connections, but maybe if you did take the data and really study it, you could help to make you better business choices, but I don't know. I'm not there. Couldn't do that.
So I know it's kind of like a weird gray area for me in terms of how I feel about that because it's like, "Oh, that's awesome. You can, really use that data and, like, do what traditional marketing analytics would do to be like, oh, this is product data that we can use to understand how to market to people and where to show up.'" But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but it's your thing, It's like
Yeah.
what you're bringing to the table, like your creation, so people should find you. That's really interesting because it's like, yeah, I can see both sides of that.
I feel like I'm still in the phase of learning and enjoying that process of figuring it out. Like, I'm enjoying playing with the material and making things that I like. I don't know if that'll ever be done, especially with ceramics. It can be a lifetime of learning and growing and changing but I just don't know if I'll ever be there business-wise for that to be a huge part of what drives what I make.
Yeah, that's a really good transition to my next question, which is about more so people finding you. So, in terms of social media, first of all, you've done an excellent job curating your social media. It's just gorgeous and it's a
That
blast to scroll. And yeah, you've done an excellent job. But I think like how often or like what is your strategy around social media? If you have a strategy, or is it one of those things where it's like, I don't know, how do you think about it? How does it become part of your work or is it something you prioritize?
I would love to prioritize it more. I feel like I have put so little effort into my social media, and again, comparing to others, I'm like, "Wow, this person has this many followers, like, that's amazing, how do you do that?" And I think to myself, "Well, you should probably post more than once a month." I'm just not putting that much effort into it, but again, it comes down to that vulnerability thing, like, it's having to put yourself out there. I don't mind showing the process of my work because I think that's very like, that's neat, and I love to follow other potters and other makers and see their process. Those are the videos that I gravitate towards. I do think social media is an amazing tool for makers to widen their reach and the connection for people who may connect and buy their work, and also for you to connect with other makers and other educational institutions and just other opportunities and things like that. So I think I underutilize it. So thank you so much for giving me the confidence and telling me I did a good job curating it because I really feel like it's been something that I've put off and I really want to try to be more intentional with it, I guess.
Yeah, there's so many things that go into it, and this is coming from, like, work experience specifically. It's like any individual piece of marketing or having, like, a brand strategy or even a personal brand strategy, there's so much that goes into it that each little piece is like its own full-time job.
Yeah.
What would be helpful to makers to make this a full-time thing for them? Like, social media is a piece of it, I think understanding, the market value of what they're making and those kinds of things, but, like, what would be the most helpful for makers kind of just at a society level? Like, what can we do as consumers to make it easier to make a true living off of handmade goods? And this is I'm expecting you to solve everything in one answer, so
I do feel like there is certainly a niche and a way for people who want to be a maker to be for that to be their full-time thing. I just see right now it takes time. Like I that's why so many people that I know it was a side thing until it became their full thing. It just takes so long for their business to grow, whereas when you're just, maybe graduating college or whatever and you're taking a job, that's an that's an income you don't have to really think about. You can budget it based on what it's gonna be, but it's basically gonna support you and you know that money's coming in. So for a maker, you're just kinda making and putting yourself out there and your stuff out there and hoping that the income comes in. And some markets, which, I mainly sell at markets. I don't do a lot of online sales. Sometimes people will message me through social media and make that connection. But, with markets, sometimes you make money, sometimes you lose money at a market. So it's very, I guess what I would need, I don't know. There's several different ways you could get to that point. I just think that it's gonna take time no matter what and no matter for whom. It's gonna take just time and effort and learning who your audience is and where you can sell your work. And I just think that that's something you just can't, like, instantly day 1 say, "I'm gonna be a potter or a maker or furniture maker or whatever, and this is gonna be my income." You have to have some sort of financial backup or backing when you're first starting.
that makes perfect sense. So in terms of, like, your relationship with handmade goods as a consumer, not as a maker, but as a consumer, how do you think about buying handmade? Is it something that kind of happens in line with the markets that maybe you're doing, or does it come from, like, a community of makers that you know? More so just how do you think about buying handmade on your own, if you do? No pressure, no shame.
No, I definitely buy handmade, and I think it's something that you kind of pick up more and more and is curated over time. You can't go out and buy everything you need for your home in one go. I remember, like you're in college, you have hand-me-down things or things people gift to you, but slowly over time, I switched things out. Oh, I bought this, handmade wooden cutting board. Now I don't need this one that came from the thrift store or that came from my mom's house or something like that. So over time, I acquire more handmade items. And the really fun thing about being a maker and being at markets are the trades that people do. So a lot of times I can be like, ooh, I like that. Do you want to do a trade after? So that's kind of how I've acquired more handmade items as well, which is really fun.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I just got so excited just thinking about that of like the underground movement of
Yes, I
barter.
had an idea when I first was doing pottery and not really selling of just like an art swap because artists sometimes it can be a struggle. So you may not be able to afford something that you really love from another artist. So if there was just like some way to have like an art swap or a website where artists trade for other artists. But then I started doing markets. I'm like, oh, this is that idea. This is what people do. And when you go to a market, some people could be from other states, and so you're getting introduced to people that you wouldn't have met otherwise.
Oh, that's incredible. That's beautiful. Okay, I have 2 more questions for you.
Oh, sure.
The first one is about kind of the community. So to your point about, like, being able to trade and, like, meet people at markets. Do you have kind of, like, people in your circle that you stay in touch with that are makers that you, like, bounce ideas off of, or does it kind of happen centralized to markets?
I do, but you have to make it a point to make those connections and turn those just kind of surface level connections into more of a friendship or relationship. So I do seek out people that I admire and want they're like here and I want my work to be up where they are. I'll seek out talking to them specifically, and it's taken me a while to do that because sometimes when you're new at something, you put them way above. But really, the more you talk to people, the more you realize people are just super nice and very generous, especially the potter community. I don't know why that is, but people are usually just very generous with their knowledge and their time. And I've made connections, and people have invited me to go to their studio, have opened the door to if you have any questions or anything's going on, you can reach me this way and that way. So it's just been a very good experience with that.
Oh, that's amazing. What is the best way to keep up with your work?
I would say my Instagram that I'm trying to post more on. I'm always putting, when I have a show upcoming, some posts with some work that just came out of the kiln that I will have with me, and then the dates and the time and location of the show. So my Instagram would be a great way to see that information.
Beautiful. Amazing. Well, thank you so, so much for doing this today, and I'm so excited to share this.
Well, awesome. Thank you again for having me. It's been really great to get in touch. And I just think this project is such a good idea. And I'm excited to listen to all the different people in the business, in the maker business that you'll have featured. This is amazing.
That's it for this episode of the Makers Movement podcast. I hope Christina's approach to mixing all those different techniques got you thinking, maybe about that sad desk setup that you've been ignoring, or just how much more fun writing can be with the right tools around you. Your challenge this month: find something handmade to write with or to write on. Support a maker, make your workspace a little bit more interesting, and when you snag something good, tag us at makers.movement. We love seeing what catches your eye. And hey, when you choose handmade, you're choosing actual humans doing actual work, which is pretty cool. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy hunting.